So this evening, Books and Books is very happy to welcome back our friend Cesar Becerra, presenting his new book, Robert is Here, Looking East for a Lifetime. And Robert is actually here, Mr. Robert Molling. He's going to be joining Cesar for the presentation. Cesar Becerra is a local historian who has hiked the Appalachian Trail, driven all 50 states in one calendar year. He did that for the Travel Channel. And for the last 11 summers, he has walked from Key West to Phoenix. And I hope he catches a flight back instead of having to walk back, but I haven't asked him yet. He is also the author of the previous book, A Love Affair with Frankie's Pizza. Many South Floridians know the story of the birth of the Robert is Here fruit stand. How a small kid, aged 6, was left on the corner to sell surplus cucumbers. When no one stopped, the next day a sign went up reading, Robert is Here, and the rest is history. In this book, Cesar delves deeper into this remarkable institution and discovers that the well-known story of how it all began is just the tip of the iceberg and may be the least interesting thing about Robert is Here. Here to tell us more about it, please give a very warm welcome to Mr. Cesar Becerra.
Thank you, Victor. I appreciate it. Thank you all for coming out. I really, truly mean that. As I began this project, I thought it's a pretty good start. It's got me hooked. It's a great story, and it's been told a zillion times. I'll start tonight's talk with kind of like a proof positive that that might be just one of the many interesting stories about Robert. And it may be just one of not necessarily the top. 5 months ago, the President of the United States came to South Florida. He flew to Miami to give a talk in Everglades National Park. He was here for Earth Day. Came in, landed at Miami International Airport, got in Marine One, flew over South Dade, landed in the park. He gave a speech. While this was happening for many, many hours, and presidential events are just infamous for hurry up and wait, VIPs that had been chosen around South Florida were ushered into an area just like this, kind of seated down, and they waited, and they waited. And Robert Molling was there in the front row, testament to how hard he's worked to get put in that front row. But Robert Molling was just fidgeting that day with something in the back around his waistline, and the Secret Service took very careful note of this. They don't like people fidgeting anywhere. Just here, wherever. And one of them came over. And he inquired about what exactly Robert Molling was fidgeting for. And Robert said, well, when the president, I'm going to give him one of my bicycle jerseys. And the Secret Service, with his serious little earpiece and his sunglasses, he leaned into Robert and in no uncertain words, in a sense, said, listen, you are not going to be reaching behind for anything when the president gets here, or even if he comes to you. He might reach your hand out, and then you may reach out to him. But you are not going to present the president with anything. And so that was a cool story, but it gets a little better. President makes his speech, it's over, and the President of the United States takes a beeline straight to Robert Molling. He's the first person, puts out his hand, and he shakes it, and he says, hi, I'm Barack. Now remember this, the story literally gets incremental every sentence. It goes, Robert shouts back, hi, I'm Robert. And then the President of the United States of America says the following line, I hear you have something for me. Pretty cool. Because this is, after all, a story that starts with a day that everybody ignored Robert. We wouldn't be here literally today celebrating this remarkable family if somebody kind of stopped and another person stopped and bought a few cucumbers. The point is, that first day, and I'll read to you that chapter, nobody stopped. But yet here is the President of the United States, the Secret Service took very careful note And the next line was just too funny. Then after that, Robert says, yeah, but your boys won't let me give it to you. All it was missing is some cigars and some seats and just... And then he smiled, and he looked to the left to one of his Secret Service and says, give it to my man right here. And he did. So I tell you that because it's just a fascinating... There's so many stories. There's not too much time to tell them all. But one of the neat things about the Robert is Here story is that it begins and it's been put out there over and over again. Small kid, left on corner, nobody bought anything, and the next day they put up a sign. But that story has been told many, many times, isn't truly the beginning of the Robert is Here story. To go back to the beginning, you have to go back to a very remarkable, feisty, amazing, interesting lady named Mary Monaco. Really, she was something else. She grew up on the tough side and tough streets of Chicago, was one of those people who ran with other kids who literally at times were hired by the mob to move guns to particular areas of town so that if the mobsters were stopped by the cops, they wouldn't have the guns. They would move things with these rough and tumble kids. Mary Monaco was so kind of street savvy that that actually seeped into later on in our story of how the birth of Robert is Here begins. Because we always focus on Robert on that corner, but Mary Monaco, very, very important. And she wouldn't have even got down here to South Florida if one day she and her sister, lovingly referred to as Auntie Angie, were hitchhiking to get into town to buy some Christmas presents. Well, there was a gentleman named Bob Moling who just happened to stop at the right time, the right place, and the history of South Florida changed forever because he picked them up, and that's how the Moling side came in contact. Of course, I'm even skipping a great subsection that you'll hear a little bit more about in the book, where Mary Monaco later on is a bosun, and she's so tough and rough and tumble, she one day finds her husband cheating on her. Well, she took a proverbial frying pan and whacked him across the head, ends up in jail, and apparently is, at that time, pregnant with Mr. Bosun's child. And as soon as that was, oh, you got to get her out of jail, she says, no way. I'm going to have this baby right here. This was the stock that Robert comes from. This is tough, tough stock. So after they marry, they finally come down to South Florida. And Robert's story, in my opinion, really begins page 1 with him kind of on his tippy toes on the front of a truck looking for a big number 4 and 1, 41, 41, 41. As they move their family down the South Day to start life anew. Not necessarily farming per se, but basically the Slick Chick Egg Ranch, which is how they really got their start. Before they fully went into farming, even though they did some farming, it was really a turnkey operation that they bought, and they called it the Slick Chick Egg Ranch. Times were very, very, very tough. And I surmise that they were probably at a point, as Robert would tell me, that things were so tough where I bet the family was internally deciding whether this was a really good idea or not. Okay? And the next thing that happens is something that should have never happened by design, only we see it as a genius marketing moment. This moment where this sign is created that has intrigue, etc. But really it was created for a whole separate reason. So I'm going to read to you from chapter 3 of the book to get a glimpse of just how remarkable that moment was. 400 bushels of cucumbers didn't sell. This is something no farmer wants to hear, but that's the news that Bob Moling got from the packing house in Perrine in November of 1959. Apparently, the market for cucumbers was flooded, and back then it was impossible to coordinate with other farmers to decide who would grow what. He was faced with a decision, either dump the cukes or haul them back home. Had Bob Moling any semblance of luck in the farming world, he probably would have done what most farmers would have done, and painfully as it seemed, dumped the cucumbers. Keeping them in the walk-in fridge in Perrine would not be cheap. So he loaded them all back up and hauled them home. His main concern was that he needed these boxes for the next harvest, more than he needed the risky proposition of attempting to recoup his investment. The next day, Bob took 2 of those 400 bushels and his son Robert and plopped them down on the corner of Southwest 344th Street and 192nd Avenue. This decision not only changed his luck, but also South Dade history forever. However, on that Saturday in 1959, Bob did not set out to change history. He didn't. Or his poor luck in farming. He was simply trying to make a few dollars to put food on the table and to rescue the boxes he would need to harvest and pack the other vegetables. And by the likes of his luck, he was scrambling to keep up on all unsuccessful fronts. His unstable attempt relocating the family from Chicago to Homestead, Florida, was looking like a bad idea. It was not all his fault. Farming in general comes with it an inherently tricky contract with both the weather and the market. His slick chick egg ranch was eking along at a slow and steady clip, too slow to warrant any resting on any laurels. The family business relied on an all-hands-on-deck reality. Each child, including stepchildren, were pressed into roles or a few roles. Age was of no major or massive concern, as explained by Harry Boson, Robert's brother, or older half-brother. You could walk. If you could walk, you could hold an egg, and you were put to work. There was no real question. That's just what we did. And we weren't alone. When you looked around, it was what any family in that area was doing. You as a family member would have to help out the family. I did so well in my college years, this is Harry talking, breaks were unheard of. In fact, any break I had from college, I'd be back in Homestead helping out my family. After all, the family business helped put me through school. But you never questioned it. You never questioned it. You just rolled up your sleeves and did what you were told. It was just a different world back then. In the shadow of all that was happening in 1959 sat a boy of 6 years of age. 6 years, just think about that. Plopped down on a rural and rocky street corner in South Dade County, Robert Moling knew next to nothing about selling cucumbers. The whole setup seems like a clever, if not implausible, entrance shot for a quirky, independent art film a la The Red Balloon, the Academy Award-winning film in which a young boy chases a balloon around the city of Paris. Only in this film, there's no movement, no sweeping views of the scene, much less the Miami River. There's no movement at all except for that of the baking sun. Quickly, time lapses. It passes over the head of a hatless boy to sell cucumbers for packing box money. In the background are only Dade County pines with broccoli-topped heads wafting a few inches this way and that. I can see a close-up on one of the two lizards, or few, crossing the road with an occasional rush of a lone pickup truck whizzing past the 2 bushels of cucumbers. The driver, mistakenly assuming that a farmer was probably coming back in a few minutes to load up the cucumbers to take them to market. The passerby do not notice the 6-year-old child charged with selling those 2 bushels of cucumbers. As the weight of the impossibility begins to rest upon our film-going minds, setting up what would be a textbook example of an underdog character, if there ever was one, I envision the soundtrack to Henry Cowell's 1959 hit, High Hopes, blaring. Oh, he's got high hopes. This would be the perfect finish of a pre-film title sequence. The best pre-film title sequences not only roll the names of the principal movie makers and featured actors, but they deliver a firm introduction to the main character while dancing around the main plot. In this case, small boy, lonely corner, bushels of cucumber, tough sell. Back at the Moling residence that first night, Bob and Mary tried to make sense of the day. Clearly, this scenario had worked before. It wasn't fancy, but let's face it, the Molings certainly hadn't invented the roadside produce stand. This was rural South Dade, and it was just how things were done. For centuries, those who enjoyed good, fresh, and cheap produce knew to go straight to the source. And there's no closer source than a homespun stand along a field in rural you-name-itville. In many cases, the produce, whether vegetables or fruit, came from the very field that dotted the background. In some cases, you even paid for the privilege of going out into the field yourself to pick the produce. My parents' main conclusion, starts Robert, was that nobody saw me. Robert begins to tell the story of the day that changed his life forever. And because no one saw me, they must have confused the 2 bushels of cucumbers as just picked pile. And amazingly enough, people respected that in those days. In fact, later in life, we'd sometimes leave a coffee can next to a pile of tomatoes. Folks who respect and honor and trust paying for what they took, and abiding by a sign, we left with the price and by allowing the can of money to miraculously stay the day without being robbed. But whatever the case, it was Robert's mother, Mary, who conjectured that the issue must have been that nobody saw the 6-year-old boy sitting next to the bushels. Keen-eyed neighbor Mr. Lee, of course, was keeping an eye on that corner. Either the bushels peripherally were dwarfing Robert and made him vanish into thin air, or by sheer bad luck he was sitting in such a way that the bushel masked the fact that he was there to begin with. In that last scenario, Robert owes a bit of his existence, an epic story, to his placement in relation to the bushels, to the very spot where he or his father plopped down the crate upon which he'd sat on that long, hot day. My father then quickly drafted 2 rather large wooden boards that had been used as hurricane shutters and began to spray paint in cursive, "Robert is here." That Sunday, Robert was plopped back out on that now famous corner, only this time with 2 signs, one that could be read from the northbound lane and one that could be read for those traveling south. Both said, "Robert is here." The Mollings left Robert there and went back to work, sifting through vegetables, washing squash and zucchini, and performing the endless number of chores and duties with which a farming family must contend. "I don't remember if I even had lunch or water," continues Robert, straining his memory and seeking help from a blank-faced, shoulder-scrunching Tracy who quizzically smiles at him as if to say, "What are you looking at me for? I wasn't there." Robert continues, realizing that his parents wouldn't have done that to him. "I'm not saying I didn't have any water or any food, but I just don't remember if I had any." Robert doesn't remember much of that day, but he does remember this: business was good. Really good. Before 11 a.m., he had sold those 2 bushels of cucumbers and so began walking back. Picture that, everybody. 6-year-old kid walking back along Palm Drive to his parents' house. Each cucumber was selling approximately a nickel, 50 cucumbers, probably $5 stuffed in my pocket, Robert says. So I'm strolling home, and as I round the corner, I can remember my father hunched over this big, huge barrel we made out of a gas tank. He was cleaning the dirt off squash and looking back at me in a bit of a rage. "What are you doing here?" The gist of what Robert remembers is that his father thought he should be at work. And his job that day was to stay on that corner till his father returned at the end of the day to retrieve him, the money and any unsold cucumbers. Robert retorted, imagine, 6-year-old kid, "I got nothing else to sell." Robert explains that his father was not a friendly guy sometimes. He was pretty angry. I think the first part of his anger and confusion was how I walked all the way back to the house alone. The second part of his anger was clear. In Bob's mind, and based on this not-so-lucky track record in farming, the possibility that Robert had sold 100 cucumbers in under 3 hours just didn't exist. That would have been impossible. In essence, plopping Robert on that quarter was an efficient parenting technique, however difficult to understand by today's standards, of keeping your children busy and out of your hair, and as well as using extra hands and bodies to your advantage, to which many children who go on farms can attest to. But Robert did sell out. The cucumbers were gone. As Robert explained to his father, and his father's anger metamorphosized into wonderment and possibility, then roller coastered back to a feeling of a missed window of opportunity, one in which he could have sold even more bushels of cucumbers. A legacy then was born. It was the first ray of sunshine in many years. Robert views the day it all began as a pragmatic light of desperation and luck. I see where he's coming from, but as a historian, I would not underestimate the genius of the simplicity of these words: Robert is here. Thank you. So before I bring up Robert Molling, I want to just tell you how, the Robert is here sign and what it's kind of egging you on to do, the curiosity that it piques. I've seen people literally just lose their breath. Like, you're Robert? This is the Robert? So not too long ago, 750,000 people showed up over a 2-month period to see Marina Abramovic at the Met, at the Museum of Modern Art in New York City, at an installation she called The Artist is Present. And she sat there for nearly 2 months, and people then came to see her just sitting there. And some people were invited to sit in front of her. And it was this massive, massive success. I mean, everybody had to go. Stars went there. 2 months, and it was pretty amazing. The Artist is Present is one of those things that, wow, let's get out. It's going to be here. But no one ever thought to make an art project on just to meet the artist is present. That's the art. But as much as the ink and the publicity and the great moment that was, I assure you that Robert has really delivered an art world first. For 50-something years, Robert has been on that corner ever since that day. That is in itself a testament. Sure, he's not been seated quietly, because you can't sit. This is like a record, to keep him, still. But he has been there, and that is just a testament that I'm honored, beyond honored, to have been able to delve into this family's history. And it's not been totally the first version of why Robert really wanted to do this book was to tell his grandchildren his story. But what's great is they certainly will learn it, but even his kids, and in some cases, there were stories that Tracy knew that Robert didn't know. And there were stories that Tracy had this amazing connection with Auntie Angie, and she told a lot of the family stories that no one else knew. And Robert was like, I didn't know that. So here we are, the gist of the book for the grandchildren, and the family and the sons and daughters all learn, and that's part of it. So I'm very, very honored. Without further ado, guys, I want to introduce to you Robert Moling. Thank you. You can come on up here. Now, I was going to interject one thing. Robert, you have this thing with your love of tomatoes. Can you get into a little bit of that, if you may?
Well, it's not only, I don't think it's working. It's not only the tomatoes. Everything we put on our market out of our farm or from other farmers, we've grown into having, we want to have the absolute best quality that you can possibly have. And the best quality sometimes is changed by your customers. And you have to maintain that quality no matter customers, what they've done to the tomatoes in this case. And we've learned that if you put tomatoes with the stems down and packed in a pyramid looking like they've not been molested, people buy them. And after an hour, the tomato pile looks like it's been molested real bad and dug through. The young lady coming up to buy the produce doesn't want something anybody else touched. So we have to go through and make sure that it looks like we just put them up. Or if we get a pile that's halfway run down, but still a nice pile, I'll tell the boys, I said, pull that pile down and rebuild it again. And while we're rebuilding, oh my God, the amount of customers that buy more stuff, simply because we do pay attention to what we put up, no matter whether it be tomatoes or mangoes or avocados or whatever. But I need to tell a little story. As the stand went on, we didn't grow tomatoes on our farm or corn, and we had been buying tomatoes from different growers. And when it first started, a couple of the growers brought me stuff as a little kid sitting on the side of the road to see me succeed, and it was pretty cool getting all this stuff for nothing. And and the prices were as cheap as they could be because I didn't have to pay for it.
Listen, I can bring my chair over here.
There came a time where me and my dad would get out early in the morning, especially on Saturday or Sunday, and we would go harvest in some of the growers' tomato properties. As everybody heard of the hole in the donut, they had Cuban Missile Crisis. One of the farmers that we bought from let my dad and I go down and harvest our tomatoes from some vines or parts of the fields that were already harvested, the crown tomatoes, but you don't pick everything. So we would go through and we would harvest what we're going to sell that morning, that day, and we'd get out there early, And as a little kid, it was like a competition who could pick the most tomatoes and who could. You have to take the stems off, and as long as the quality was there, the biggest ones, of course, sell better than the smaller ones. And it was a competition which was very, very positive. It was when your dad is out there, your dad's going to kick your ass no matter what happens, because he's not going to let some little kid beat you. So you got to work twice as hard to do your dad under. And but it was very good. And also corn. John Alger would harvest corn, and they would never pick the second ear of corn on the stalk. They would do it with a mule train, as they started picking now. They don't pick it by machine anymore. And the second ear of corn is left on the vine because it's not big. It won't grade out as number one. In a week to 10 days, that ear is quality. But they usually just disc the field up and it's done. But he would let us go into the cornfield, and we'd pay $1 a gunny sack. The potato sacks that they do the potato sack races and the parties, that bag would cost me $1, but I have to go out and pick it. And we would go out in the morning and pick corn. And we'd load up a truckload of corn and a trailer load of corn. And if anybody knows where a mutineer is on the way to the Keys, my dad would park me on that corner. There was nothing there with the trailer. And he'd take the truck and bring it back home to Robert is Here. And we'd have a competition selling corn. Who could sell out the most corn after harvesting it that day, that morning, or that morning before, on Saturdays and Sundays. So it's what we do is just our life. It's not anything mysterious. We work every day. I do not like to waste time. If you're walking someplace, you should have something to carry where you're walking, and then come back with what you went to walk for. And this is what I've always done, and it makes it work. And I try to instill it to all my kids. Trying to do it with the grandchildren, but they're still in the play stage. And when grandchildren are there, Grandpa wants to play so badly. So I don't have a good example to show. But I could carry on. I've got 56 years of information, and I just don't know how much time and stories you want to hear. And I've always found that when I'm given whatever I'm doing here, because I don't call it speeches, but I talk to a lot of people now, that when I open the mic up and receive questions, I can learn a whole lot from my people in front of me, way more than what they learn from me, and that helps me out later on. So if there's any questions, if you got questions of the book that you might want to hear, if anybody's seen I won't talk a lot about the book because we'd like for you to read it, but I can go. We could have written the book 3 times this size. Yeah, I don't know how many hours was it?
200 hours of
200 hours of interviews.
We have a question right there, Jay.
Yes.
I have a question for you. Did your father ever get to see this enterprise?
My dad kicked out of gear in 1975, and we were going. We were a pretty good business by that time. He was only 48. He didn't ever make it as a farmer. When he sold all his equipment, I started farming the very next year because I'd bought some property and I'd rented some property, and I started. Actually, the fruit stand property was rented from day one. It was year-to-year leases, and I built my empire on something I had no clue if it was going to be there next year for many, many years. And my dad went to work at flood control, and that's the canal network that's supposed to drain our property if it gets flooded. And he was spraying aquatic weed killer, his first job, and he got in trouble because he was killing fish and he wouldn't do it anymore. And he was going to be fired because he quit working. And then he said, go ahead and fire me. So he called Channel 7 News. And he says, if you want to fire me in front of the news, we'll get fired. But he kept his job. But 5 years later, almost to the day, he was really bad shape medically. Went to the doctor, and Dr. Chrissy called me to the side. He says, he's got leukemia, and it's so bad, it looks like he's had it for almost 5 years. So if you do backwards check, at that time we had no no concept of what chemicals can do to us. They weren't spraying with masks. They didn't have rules and regulations on mixing, and you know. So anyway, we worked really hard. He saw the Dolphins go undefeated, so. So,
We have a question right here.
I have a comment and a question. I worked for zoning hearings for Miami-Dade County, and I remember when you had to have your hearing after you'd been there forever. And I told everybody in the office, I said, they can't deny him that Robert is here as an institution in this county.
Also, I tell my customers I belong in an institution.
I know now you're closed for like renovations or something. Are you going to change?
Well,
Robert's?
we might have to, but it's really hard to find a family who loves each other the best in the world and not have some weekend time or a day off. And we went the first 41 years without any days off. Every Christmas, every Easter, every Thanksgiving, every New Year, okay? And we still do all those holidays except for Halloween, because it's the end of October and I don't work in October. We all work hard. We paint the store, we put the farm in. It just doesn't happen just because we're not there. It all comes back together again. It's been torn apart. We'd love to possibly stay open. I think financially it's a killer to close. The variety of produce, September and October, is not there. You come in, you won't see what we have the whole rest of the year. It's hard to keep it like we have it. But we're going to try to increase our square footage so we can have the customer have a more positive influence. Because sometimes you come in, we're so blessed with so many customers that we have so many people. It's hard on us, but it's even harder on my customers because we're trying our best to make your visit to Robert Is Here as pleasurable as you can. We want to talk to everybody. We want to make sure everybody's waited on at one time with one-on-one with someone of our staff, possibly some of our staff along with a family member. And it's pretty nice having 2 months where our family can get together. So that's it might happen, but it'd be a sad day if we can't go and do stuff together. Plenty of questions. Yes.
How long you foresee that the farming homestead will be dying? Can you repeat?
You know, we can. How long do you think?
Robert,
How long do you think that I foresee farming and homestead will be dead? I'll tell you this: as long as I'm alive, I'm going to eat. Oh, I didn't even recognize you there. Debbie's one of ours. But anyway, I don't think. Oh my goodness, it went dead again. I don't think it's going to be like we know it. This year, right now, is not like what we knew 10 years ago or 20 years ago. It's completely changed. The world is, for some reason, our society loves imported stuff. I don't understand it. It's amazing. The industry is demanding to have cheap produce for you in Walmart, cheap produce that looks good. They don't care what they put on it. It's ridiculous. We have to have rules and regulations we play by when it comes stuff from other places. I sell imported stuff. We get mangoes in the wintertime that will be close to what our quality is, but way better quality than what the varieties of mangoes at the stores that want cheap stuff. Because the mangoes I bring in have to sell them for more money because they're better quality, good flavor, no strings. That's just one item. Yes, another question?
No, I have an avocado tree. When I go to the store, like Publix,
Mhm.
buy avocado. Not really the same taste. Mine
Well,
is better.
Our avocados, you have to understand. Our
By the
avocados.
way, I hate to interrupt you. I'm from Cuba, you know.
That's
Avocado.
okay. I'll tell you why our avocados in South Florida that we grow here are basically the same varieties he's talking about from Cuba. And when you grow one in your backyard, it doesn't taste like the avocado you get out of the store. They do not know how to handle them. Our avocados really don't want to be in the cooler. They want to ripen nice and warm. And then you can put them in the cooler for a day or two. The Haas avocado, the black one, you could eat them a year after they're picked. They stay in the cooler. And that, it's died. They brought it back to life, and then you eat it. Our avocados, you have to eat fresh. Voila. That's why our avocados taste better, especially when in our backyard. Yes, ma'am.
With the whole farm-to-table concept nowadays in restaurants, trying to promote that, has that not helped, your business? And do you find that a lot of the local restaurateurs that are in the area are coming to you to buy your produce?
They come to places. You got to understand, we love to hear stories like that. And it makes you come in. Can you imagine running your business where you had to go run down enough produce for your huge restaurant to make a living on every day, or have it get it delivered to you? We don't have any vegetables here in the summertime. Where does it come from? You got to look at it as they're doing their best. Don't believe absolutely everything. You got to look at it as a reality check. And if you get 50% that are farm to table, hey, that's more than you got before. A lot of times they bring stuff in. There are a few, but everything is not. But we have really good quality grown in this country. If we can get it from this country, that's where we ought to get it from. No matter whether it's South Florida or whatever. If we can't get it from this country, such as some of the tropicals that I bring in, there's times like we don't have them here, they don't grow here that time of the year, and I can introduce you to stuff year-round that can't get in this country, and it works out well. We have a problem down there right now with our Oriental fruit fly, and they're asking farmers to destroy their crop in this one circle, huge, 4.5 miles across, I think it is, and a big circle. Now you live in there, you have your farm in that area. Guess who's flipping that bill? Us United States citizens are asking you to go absolutely bankrupt for 2 years, or whatever long it takes, 6 months, 8 months. And then outside that zone, you got to go through rigorous things to make sure that there's no fruit fly, and then you can sell your product. But there needs to be some subsidies. I don't know. When I see $500 billion, maybe it's million, I don't know, to prop up some Afghan or force somewhere that's going to fight somebody, and then they all turn their weapons over to the enemy because they don't want to fight. And I'm saying, my God, we got people here in this country, we have to fight for our own fruit that we have growing here. My food, not just the fruit, beans, squash, corn, everything is affected by this fly. But we'll see what happens. Hopefully they'll get that taken care of, because we can't have that destroying our agriculture in Florida, and then it'll go all over the country. But
we have a chapter in the book that we put towards the tail end of the book about the challenges that South Dade farmers face. And one of the moments where I went from, oh, this would be a cool book to write, where I have to write this book, was on a tour that Brandon Moling gave one day, and he paused in the middle and did what I was just kind of shocked anybody would do. He kind of pulled the curtain back of the Great Oz and showed everything and said, it's not enough to just be a farmer today. We have what we call here the show. And the show sometimes is more than just selling things, but the way you sell it and what you put out there, and the friendliness and the camaraderie, the musicians, the cars, and all that stuff. It's not easy, and it's a constant battle. And that's where I started to really learn from the kids, and each kid has their own chapter, and with them the spouses. When I say this is a family business, and when he says we, there is a total family business, not just the kids. The spouses are all in it, all through it. So I've learned an immense amount from Brandon, from Victoria, from Robert Jr., and Savannah. I mean, they are just been, and then their spouses, all of them have been incredible. So there's chapters based on that. one thing is for the kids to like, I want to do this. Yeah, okay, I'll do this. But to the spouses, amazing. So Anna, wife of Robert, she's tackling, and nobody just tackles one thing, but mainly is tackling all the shipping components and where everything is going around the nation. Okay, you have Heather Moley, who handles HR and other things and marketing now. 45 part-time employees, 15 full-time, but 60 employees. This is not a simple operation, and when it gets busy, it gets really busy. Case in point, one person who did an immense amount of foundational work for the ice cream shop, Victoria, who was in the beginning there with her mom, and a little bit with Savannah that took it on later. This is an operation that moves 1,900 shakes in a day, surpassing, much to the shock of the manufacturer who came around, what their normal blenders would do. They were like, what? What do you, so everybody's part of it, When Savannah's not there to make the guacamole or the salsa, it's just not the same. People have said, like, what's going on? So it's all, everybody is a part of it. Jesus, Victoria's husband, there to build up the water park that you have in the back. I mean, I can go on and on. It's really a firm, full, completely across the board family effort, and that's awesome in this day. It's really
would
cool.
be non-existent if the family wasn't there. I couldn't do it. So we have any more questions?
Other questions? Okay. Yes.
It's not really about the book because I haven't read it yet, but every time that I go to Robert is here, I like to taste the different types of honey that you have. How in the world do you get all those different types of honeys, and are they local?
Well, honeybees are pretty tricky devils. When you move an empty hive of honeybees into a grove of avocados, we'll just pick them. They're going to work the blossoms that are closest to them as hard as they can. If it hits some weeds or whatever, that's fine. But there's millions and millions of blossoms of avocado. And as soon as the avocado blossom goes away, it's done, it's set in a little fruit. You pull that honey off that hive and you spin it out and you move those hives into another thing that's blooming, be it whatever, orange blossoms or whatever's blooming. And that's where you get your avocado honey. Your tupelo comes from the tupelo tree. They move the bees in by boat up in North Florida. And that's the tupelo honey, which is probably my favorite honey of all. It has a wonderful flavor and does have a different sugar content that people are a lot smarter than me know that it can be consumed by a diabetic. It has a different makeup. Different honeys from different blossoms, orange blossom, avocado, tupelo, lychee. All of a sudden, you start seeing on my shelf, I was hard-headed. I wouldn't let the blends come in. I said, no, I want everything pure, raw honey, whatever it is. But a guy friend of mine told me, he says, as long as you get honey in your customer's body, if it has a magnificent flavor like key lime, put some key lime oil in there. They're going to love it. So I started selling key lime honey. And we did, what are some of the others? Tangerine, honeybell, palmetto. Well, palmetto is from the flower. But so I've got some blends of raw honey that absolutely tastes fantastic, Amaretta. And then I got the raw honeys. My second favorite is from North Carolina, sourwood. And that's how we get all the different kinds of honey. And we have figured out how to have you sample your honey without the massive mess that we used to have. My customers have to be kin to farm animals. Because we'd go back here every hour to 2 hours and have to do a complete revamping. They were in the squeeze bottles that they'd squeeze into the little spoons. And we'd find spoons everywhere, honey spilt everywhere, honey on the floor. I got a early crowd on the weekends. If you've ever been there early in the weekends, you'll know who I'm talking about. They're back there doing this. And I'm going, geez, God. Anna came up with pint jars with these pumps that pump the volume that fit on our spoons. And we figured out a method of keeping those pint jars fastened to the table. And it works.
Sure, it
and,
works.
And I've had so many compliments on how we've actually cleaned up the honey sampling area. We were giving away, I think it was 50 gallons of honey. Was it a week or a month? It was ridiculous. And about half of that maybe was consumed. The rest of it was wasted. So now we're about down to maybe 10 gallons of honey. And honey is right about $50 a gallon. So you figure it out. Having a sample tray has to sell a lot of honey to make it pay off. But it brought a question. And that question came from all those different kinds of honey and how she got to, it makes everything I do at the store, I love to have questions about. And that's why we try to have our staff able to answer a question as simple as where's a great restaurant to eat at? Anything like that. We just, because you're not coming into a store. You're not coming in just a farm. You're coming into my family. And my family is there to take care of our friends. And this is what we do. More questions. Back here in the blue.
What is your best seller of the variety of honey?
Key lime, orange blossom. The least favorite of mine, I think, is probably our best seller, the orange blossom. Orange blossom's really, really sweet. And it's a little too sweet for me. Not that honey's not supposed to be sweet, but I like a little more deep flavor. And, the blends do real well. Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to thank you for giving out all this fruit salad.
Thank you. My daughter-in-law, Heather, and I think Anna had something to do with it, and they just came through. I think Brandon went out and picked some. I think maybe Ed Castleberry brought the carambolas and the jackfruit. Ed Castleberry is one of our farmers down there that I depend on. He comes up with some really good stuff, and a lot of the weird stuff you get is coming from his farm. Because what we grow, I sell it all out. The only thing I have maybe some extras with is a mango or two, but we cut them up and do milkshakes out of those. Yeah.
If you'll notice, when Robert needs a little help on something that's been studied ad nauseum, he'll turn to one of his family members. One of the interesting things is that these guys have become expert psychologists on how things work, how they move, where they need to be, how they need to be turned, where they need to be, everything. And sometimes they seem like they're complete marketing geniuses. One of the great stories that I like, I'll share two quick stories about the organic way that Robert is here morphed into something that some people say back, that was a smart idea. But it wasn't a smart idea, it just happened. One of the great things is, like, they have the petting zoo in the back, or the animals in the back, and people love it, and the families love it. But really how it began was a friend of Robert came with a problem. He had all these tortoises, 112 of them, and he needed somewhere to put them. And so he plopped them in the back for a little bit, and that kind of spun off that whole thing. And then the shake business, which is a huge thing, the shake started out with the painful reality that they didn't want to throw away all this great fruit. So that is an organic way that started. And my favorite of all is the sign, the Robert is here sign. You can see from almost like space sometimes, but and you drive up and you see it, and it's like, wow, look how it pops up. Brandon always has a great description. It pops up, it looks like, oh man. Well, that started because the roofer was like, look, I'm not going to do your roof again if you go to paint on my stuff. So they had to literally prop it up, and so it wouldn't, and there was a deeper thing. The painter knew how paint, but it would leak, and the water would run. So anyway, but the point is organically, now we're like, man, that's a cool, man, they know. I mean, they do know, but there's a lot of stories that happen organically.
Just a sign on the roof. Back when Sam was just a little bitty boy, my friend Sam over here, he used to ride up a lot with his dad and stepmom on his bicycle. And the mayor of the time was John Colludi, I believe it was. He had ran the barbershop, right? Yeah. Mayor John Colludi would ride up on his bicycle. And he told me, he says, why don't you just paint on the roof? Robert is here, and it's a little bit of an angle. He says, that way, you can see it from far away. So I went up there with a paintbrush and a couple of gallons of paint, and I did it with the squares of the roof, the shingles, and painted Robert is here. And that's how the first, but it ruined all my shingles. But that's how the first sign of the one painted on the roof. We've got, I think, a picture of one in the book.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, I cut out letters out of plywood, and we hung them on chains across the top. Robert is here, and the words were in.
It's probably been 6 generations of the sign.
Oh yeah, he's
from
like,
the cursive to
Yeah.
the hanging letters to the roof flat, the roof up. So there's been a journey that it's taken.
Yes, sir.
Out of curiosity, whatever happened to that very first sign?
We have 2 of those, and both of them got destroyed in Hurricane Andrew.
Yeah.
Yeah, Hurricane Andrew really, for the people that live down there, when I talk, they'll say, it was just so unbelievable. I had them stored in an old barn, and the barn just destroyed everything.
It's one of my first questions to him. Where's the original sign?
Someone near and dear to us asked us to reproduce it. Cesar.
The sign will come back one day. I have a feeling that it will come
Just
back
never
one
got
day.
around to it. Debbie.
Robert, I have a question that I get asked all the time working on the counter. Why do you use the bags and pencils to add up everything? Why no calculators? I love that question.
I can tell you that it would probably be easier to go the other way, but as my family knows, I don't do anything that's easy. Everything's got to be done thorough and done right. It is our motif. Is that said right?
Yeah.
If I have you steady customers come in one day and I got my people working on a calculator, would we be sad as customers? Or would you be happy that they go to a calculator and you don't know if they're pushing the right numbers or not? But isn't it refreshing to see teenagers and college kids working on a paper bag? And old ladies. But, it adds a sense of pride to my employees that they're able to turn their bag around and the answer is right. And it's what we are. If we wear our right shoe on the left foot, and that's what you do, that's what you got to do. And we are backwards. You're looking at somebody who's never clicked a mouse on a computer. Yeah, not gonna do it. They make me take the health management safety, food safety test on a computer, and I tell them, show me what button does what answer, and I read it and I punch it, and that's it. And usually the computer quits. How about it? They don't want nothing to do with me. I don't want nothing to do with them. So we are very happily separated. Yes, sir.
Then in the long run, life, it fights Alzheimer.
In the long run,
Will fight
Alzheimer's? What will fight Alzheimer's? Oh, yeah? I don't know what I had for lunch yesterday.
Which you can add.
But I can add. I obviously had something. I don't miss a meal. So.
Speaking of adding, just if you want to work at Robert Is Here, the first thing you have to do is take a math test, by the way, which I amazingly failed. But they do this for several reasons. Number one, they want to first see who's going to be the ones that are going to be at the front lines. But also they want to know if they're being sent out to the kitchen and they're going to be on a level where they have to do quarter this, quarter, and they're not with it. So before you actually put your name on an application, you first had to do the math test. So that's another little.
I found that if you get people that can add right away, generally you got people that can talk to you and tell you where a good place to go eat. They're willing to share a part of their soul with you. And that's what we have as employees. Number two, you get a person that takes the math test and fails it and then comes back 3 and 4 times, that I'll go ahead and give you a job because that's an employee you want to hire. Someone who wants the job so badly, he wants so bad to get. So we let Cesar write the book.
There you go. Thank you. It's been an honor, Robert, and Robert's family. It's been an honor. There's so much more we're not going to get into, but I will say that the rest of the story is a fascinating roller coaster. It never really kind of goes in one.
Oh, wait, $10 every time someone has a phone call.
Oh. But I want to just thank you all, and I want to thank two remarkable women that were part of this project. One is Kimberly Small, the editor, and really I want to thank Tracy, because Tracy's kind of like the editor before the editing begins. Tracy was there. I mean, I was really. It's the book is, and Cindy Sipe, who created the cover of the book and took some of the photos of the book, and the book. I'll send it over to our wonderful folks at Books and Books who will tell you how to get the book. Thank you, Victor. We're going to go sit over here.
All right, folks, so if there are no more questions, a quick reminder for our internet audience watching at home. Still time for you to call the number on your screen, and we will ship a copy of Robert is Here to wherever you are in the U.S. free of charge. For those of you here in the house, we have the book for sale at the counter in the front room over there. Cesar and Robert will be signing there at the table to the left of the podium. I want to thank our special guest, Robert Moling, for joining us today, and please give another hand to Mr. Cesar Becerra. Thanks very much. Thank you.